Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprints. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock. Fresh off the leadership vote just a few days ago. We're going to talk about that next week in a future episode. I know you're kind of looking for it this week, but we do have an amazing topic, an amazing guest on, and we ask that you like, comment, share, subscribe to this program. Together, we can push back against the ever-moving Liberal agenda. If you can't listen or watch to the program in its entirety right this second, download it, listen to it on platforms like Castbox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it, it is out there. All right, let's bring on our guest. We're going to talk about energy. We're going to talk about the East Coast, how the East can help the West, how the West can help the East, and how everybody can come together as a country in this amazing confederation and help each other. We're talking to Rick Perkins, a member of Parliament for South Shore, St. Margarets, and the beautiful province of Nova Scotia. Is also the critic for fisheries and oceans. Thank you very much for coming on, Rick.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Been a while since we had an East Coaster on. I do apologize for that.
Well, there's a few more of us now, so
yes,
you got a few more to choose from, Jamie, than we had before the last election.
And hopefully the next election we'll have a lot
more. We'll double it again.
Absolutely. Hopefully. I love hearing that, especially out east. Yeah. All right. The European Union is hurting right now. We have energy prices skyrocketing. They're out of control right now. You have Germany, the German chancellor in Canada a few weeks ago, begging for Canadian energy. And the prime minister says, there's not a business case for him. Well, okay, Tips, the market's ready to put money into this. The investors are ready to put money into this. We need to get our energy to market. We need to get it to the East Coast. Justin Trudeau, again, it's not market forces, it's government putting down the industry.
I don't know that Justin Trudeau would know what a business case was if it bit him in the you-know-what, because there's a massive business case for it. The very day that Russia invaded Ukraine, they said no to the LNG plant in Quebec. The very day, the LNG plant in Quebec, we've got two proposals for LNG plants that have been on the books, one in Nova Scotia, one in New Brunswick, for years that they have been stonewalling against. If they hadn't been stonewalling for 7 years as government, we'd have the pipelines built to the East Coast and be able to supply and solve Europe's issues. They're talking about people having to see in Britain, their heating bills going up 300 pounds a month. People don't know what they're going to do. They don't have the money. And it's thanks to these policies, and we have excess oil and gas, and we can't get it to market. And even in Atlantic Canada, I have to burn Saudi Arabian oil in my house to heat my house in Atlantic Canada. That's a crime that we have to do that.
Absolutely. We have tons of energy. We have ways to create income, opportunities for people, create wealth, jobs in our own country, build it here, create it here, and export. We should be doing that. If the pandemic taught us anything, that should be it.
Yeah, that's, the whole idea that we aren't reliant on our own energy within our own country. What's more fundamental than energy security for both your economy and for our everyday lives? And certainly the war in Ukraine has shown how important having that self-sufficiency is. So the idea that we can't build pipelines because we've got still in place this no tanker bill, no pipeline bill that prevented anything from coming to the East Coast. Make no mistake, that's why it's there. It wasn't meant to provide better environmental input. It was meant to stop capital from coming to Canada, and from us in the East Coast having, again, like I say, we don't have any pipeline and we don't have oil and gas in Atlantic Canada. So our oil comes from Saudi Arabian tankers to St. John, New Brunswick to get refined. Our electricity in Nova Scotia, 58% of our electricity is generated from coal. And you might say, hey, that's great. Nova Scotia has lots of coal. Not anymore. That coal comes from Colombia. So they ship coal from Colombia to Nova Scotia to generate electricity, but we can't get natural gas and good, clean Canadian oil to Atlantic Canada to use to heat our homes and fuel our vehicles.
And look at all the lost opportunity, right? You have a lot of expertise in this. Like, as we said before on the show, capital takes the path of least resistance, just like anything, right? Yep. If there are bottlenecks, and this bottleneck in this country seems to be the federal government and its Marxist green ideology, They're shutting this down. The government is doing this to you. They're not doing this for you. They're doing this to you. That could create jobs, opportunity, and wealth, not only in the West, but also in the East. We could have self-sufficient energy independence. We could actually provide and be a beacon to the world on this. But yet our government says no.
Jamie, what's our greatest competitive advantage as a country? It's always been our natural resources. I spent a lot of years in business, and in business, you're always you're only successful if you have a competitive advantage, and you spend all your time in business trying to keep that competitive advantage. What's our competitive advantage? Oil and gas, fisheries, mining, forestry, agriculture, our resources. We're blessed with these amazing resources. You don't hear Saudi Arabia saying, I'm glad I don't have all those trees to manage like Canada does. It must be a terrible burden. Like, come on, guys. This is what our competitive advantage is, our resources, all of them. And we have a government who's intent on, frankly, shutting down all the resource sector, not just oil and gas. And our wealth has stalled. Our competitiveness has stalled. Our economy is falling behind our American and European counterparts because we're not developing our greatest natural resource. It's not too long ago that the United States was an importer of energy. Now it's an exporter. Why? Because they invested in shale gas and natural gas, and now they're exporting to the world, including to Canada. We have a pipeline that runs from the US to Nova Scotia, bringing natural gas up to Nova Scotia from the US from shale gas, but we won't build it from Alberta and Saskatchewan to the East Coast. How does that make any sense?
It is absolutely mind-boggling. And energy, as we mentioned, is climbing in Canada, has been for a while. Some provinces have reduced their provincial sales tax. Ontario, on Alberta, another. We have the European economy basically grinding to a halt. You saw stories about Germany shutting down steel plants, like steel plants, because they can't find the energy. This is absolutely incredible. And we have it here. So we have all of this happening. Cost of living, as you mentioned, energy prices, people trying to pay their energy bills, as families struggling to get by. And then you have the Atlantic provinces here standing up to the federal government and saying, hang on with the carbon tax. Yeah. We don't want the carbon tax to go up to 14 cents a liter on a liter on a fuel for your car.
Yeah, well, back in the day when Trudeau brought in his ineffective carbon tax, we had 4 provincial Liberal governments in Atlantic Canada, and they all cut a deal with Trudeau to do their own system. So in Nova Scotia, for example, we have what's called a cap and trade system. All of those systems, that deal was essentially expiring this year. And there was a deadline of September 2nd for the Atlantic provinces to say to the federal government, are they going to increase the tax on their system for their citizens in order to be compliant with the Trudeau scheme? And all 4 Atlantic premiers, 3 conservative, 1 liberal, the Liberal in Newfoundland, said, no, now is not the time for us to be increasing 14 cents a liter gas when people can't afford to heat their houses, when people can't afford food. I live in a rural riding. We don't have public transit in my riding. If you need to take your kids to hockey and to school and you need to go get groceries, guess what? You got to get in your car or your truck to do that. You have no choice. So putting that additional cost on gas, which will put the price of everything up yet again. We've already seen more than 10% food inflation. Everybody knows how crazy it is to try and buy meat now in Canada. The cost of meat has gone up, the cost of milk, the cost of everything's gone up. And Trudeau wants to increase the carbon tax in Atlantic Canada. What a shock. And we know, Jamie, right, that it doesn't work. His carbon tax has not reduced the amount of carbon emissions. In Nova Scotia, our premier proposed a net zero plan. We have better than 8 other provinces in Canada. We generate more wind electricity. Obviously, we're on the ocean than 8 other provinces in Canada. They put forward a plan to get off our coal plants and said, here's what we need. We need this hydro, it's called the Atlantic Loop, coming down through Quebec and Newfoundland. Put all this forward and said, we don't need a tax to get to net zero. Here's the plan. And they've proven we've reduced carbon emissions enormously in Nova Scotia over the last 4 or 5 years. And The federal government says, and Trudeau says, no, we're not going to do that. If you don't have a tax on people, you don't have a plan. Well, our goal and everyone's goal is to reduce the carbon output. And we can do that without doing inefficient taxes that put the price of everything up, but actually achieve zero carbon reduction emissions.
You boggled my mind there. I can't believe it. I even wrote it down. We don't need a tax to get to net zero.
Right.
That's amazing. We've been saying that forever. Right. That you can do it with technology innovation, new ways to do things. The energy sector should be A plus B, not B minus A, and creating shortages and strife. But this goes to the government trying to control everything and create dependence almost, because you're talking about the now voluntary 30% reduction of fertilizer use for farmers, controlling what we can use in energy. This just goes on and on and on.
And you're not going to get the major emitters of carbon, China, India, Europe, the United States. You're not going to get them off coal unless we can get them our liquefied natural gas, right? They need an alternative. To tell them that they should put up solar panels and windmills. The great country that has invested the most in that in the world is Germany. And with the cutoff of the pipeline from Russia, Germany is now having to restart some of their coal-fired plants and their nuclear facilities that they were going to shut down. I don't know why they were going to shut down nuclear facilities. They don't generate carbon. But the dependence and ability of us to generate other types of energy that do not put out the emissions of coal is there. And for us not to be doing our part on the climate to help get those countries off coal is really counterintuitive to what Justin Trudeau says is his goal, which is to reduce carbon emissions around the world. Well, we can help, but he won't.
Well, let's face it, the tax has always just been a revenue stream, a new revenue stream for government. Look at British Columbia, right? They've had a carbon tax long before anyone else in Canada did. And it's been shown time and time again. You can look on the Sierra Club website if you need to, right? That's not a friend of conservatives. But every year that the carbon tax has been in effect in British Columbia, emissions have gone up. But so has revenue to government. At one time, it was revenue neutral. Now it's just become blatantly obvious that it's a new stream of revenue for government to spend on whatever the politicians of the day think is best.
The parliamentary budget officer, a neutral officer of parliament, did an analysis of this supposed claim that everyone gets their money back and that the government doesn't keep any is bunk. The parliamentary budget officer said under Trudeau's carbon tax in Ontario and Alberta, by 2030, the average household would be paying $2,900 more a year in carbon tax than they get back. They're out of pocket $2,900 more. So where's that money going, Jamie? Well, we know where it's going. It's going into the coffers of the federal government to spend on Trudeau's useless programs like he's doing now and is out of control spending, which is contributing to our inflation. And he doesn't seem to get that the spending in Ottawa actually does contribute to inflation. But that tax is a fallacy that they say it's revenue neutral and everyone gets it back. They don't get it back. Parliamentary budget officer has been clear on that.
And all these little things that keep adding up, and they're starting to become big things that keep adding up. It starts to affect people and their way of life, right? You work hard, you play by the rules, and then you have a bit of extra spending money to maybe take a vacation, finish a renovation, do stuff in life that makes things happy. They're not just for the rich elites, they're for everybody. At least it's supposed to, but every time government puts on new regulations, red tape, they think their ideas are the best, but they stifle innovation, they stifle expansion, capital, you name it. This has an effect, and it slowly starts to eat away at the discretionary spending on individuals. And at that point, you're just struggling to get by. You're just working just to keep your head above water. And that's not the way this country was meant to be.
And that's why you're seeing such high levels of frustration. The Liberals, if they actually talk to their constituents, would know this. The high level of frustration that's been demonstrated in a whole bunch of things. And our most recent leadership's a great example. People have to pay $15 to be a member of a party. We don't give it away free like the Liberals do, because everything for the Liberals, I guess they can give it away for free. They give away their memberships for free. You have to pay $15 to be a member of our party. And we now have a record amount of party members, almost 700,000 Canadians paid to join our party to participate in our recent leadership race. That's never been seen before in Canada. And we've got we had an incredible turnout in the leadership. Justin Trudeau, only 100,000 people in his party, even when they gave it away free, voted in their leadership. We had over 400,000 party members vote, people who paid the $15. And that's a sign of the frustration that Canadians have with this government and the fact that everything is costing them more. And they play by the rules, as you said, Jamie. They do everything, whether it was through COVID, they pay their taxes, they work hard. And at the end of the day, they seem to have less money and they don't understand why. And it's pretty obvious why. When you have a government that spends the way this government does, that taxes the way this government taxes, and takes more and more out of your pocket every day, that's why you can't get ahead.
Rick, we're almost out of time. I do want to ask you, but I could keep going on this topic for a long time because there's so much to dig into. Why don't you tell us what you've been doing this summer? You've been kind of on a committee looking at Canada's worst mass shooting. It happened in the province of Nova Scotia. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that because there's something there as well. Probably we can have you back on the show to talk about this specifically because there is a lot going on. Maybe you could just go into that for us.
Yeah, well, we pushed as the parliament ended in June with on an issue that just came up in June, which was political interference into the police investigation into Canada's largest mass shooting, mass murder, that happened in 2020 in Nova Scotia, where 22 Nova Scotians and an unborn baby were murdered in a 24-hour period. And the Liberals clearly used the murder of 22 of my fellow Nova Scotians as a political football to bring in their order in council banning 1,500 firearms. And right from the minister's and prime minister's office down, and the commissioner of the RCMP appear to have been doing their bidding and trying to push and make sure that the information about what firearms the killer had was made public in order to support that. You know, they made that order in council public May 1st, 2020, 12 days after the mass murder of 22 Nova Scotians. And Bill Blair at committee, we've been having parliamentary committee, public safety committee meetings on this. Bill Blair at committee this summer said they decided to release it and do the order in council after the mass murder. So in other words, they were going to use the mass murder of Canadians as a political tool for their vain attempt to try and curb crime through harming legal firearm owners, while at the same time doing absolutely nothing. In fact, making it easier for criminals to commit crimes with firearms, which are committed not with licensed firearms. They're not going and getting a PAL. They're not going and storing their firearms properly at home. They're all illegal firearms that come across the border that the crimes are committed with almost exclusively. And they've lowered the penalties for committing crimes with illegal firearms, while at the same time used the murder of 22 Nova Scotians to put forward their yet again useless government interference into our law and order system. And it's really disgusting. You know, people in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada are upset that they would use this tragedy to their families as a weapon against firearms and legitimate firearm owners on a separate political agenda. So there have been hearings all summer on the Mass Casualty Commission. We've been holding parliamentary hearings into the government and the RCMP's political interference in that. And that'll continue in the fall as soon as the committee starts up again.
And it's just amazing that scandals like this and many others that we have not even brought down the government, but even brought down a minister, for crying out loud. Like
the commissioner of the RCMP last week, when she appeared, or 2 weeks ago, when she appeared before the commission inquiring on this, when she was being questioned about her role in advising the government on firearms, if you can believe it, she actually said she doesn't know the difference between a prohibited and restricted firearm. The commissioner of the RCMP, who has a legal responsibility to be the senior person in government advising the government on firearms.
That's absolutely unbelievable. Rick, I would love to talk to you more about this. We are way over time. As you may know, I give the guests the last word. So I'll open up the floor to you, your final thoughts, and then we'll get out of here.
Well, I guess it is the travel that we've all seen as we've been back in our ridings over the summer now that the House is resuming. Number one issue by far is the cost of everything. And why is that happening? And that's happening because our energy costs are up, and our energy costs are up because of the taxation and other legislative issues of this government. And it's time that we start expressing that across this country, including in Atlantic Canada, more actively and aggressively, and understanding why it is that this government, it feels the need to take more and more money out of your pocket every day for whatever their politically correct agenda is, or woke agenda that they're doing. We're going to keep fighting for all Canadians to try and bring down those costs, to get some relief at the pumps as the House is back. We're going to fight to have a real Canadian strategy to deal with inflation. We're not going to blame the dog ate my homework strategy, which is what the Liberals use every time. It's not my fault, inflation. It's somebody in Europe. It's somebody somewhere else. We're going to keep fighting in the House for Canadians and what they need.
I love that fire in your belly. Rick Perkins, Member of Parliament for South Shore, St. Margarets, the critic for Fisheries and Oceans. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jamie.
And we appreciate your time as well. Like I said off the beginning, right off the leadership, we will talk about that next week. I promise you that we did have that important topic. I needed to get it off our chests and be able to vent a bit, because it is frustration among millions across this world about why their energy prices are going through the roof, or they're being told we're getting brownouts and blackouts. So as we ask that you like, comment, subscribe, share this program. We can get this word out. Tell it to your two friends. They have two friends, and keep that chain going. If you can't listen or watch the program in its entirety right this second, download it, listen to it. Platforms like Castbox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it, it is out there. New content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, remember, low taxes, less governments, more freedom. That's the blueprint.